In the later years of the Beatles, George Harrison emerged from the shadows cast by Lennon and McCartney with a gentle but unmistakable brilliance. And in my opinion, nowhere is this better reflected than in the Beatles' most famous song, Here Comes the Sun. Buried in the middle of the Beatles' final album, Abbey Road, the song has actually made an amazing journey to becoming one of the most well-known Beatles tracks ever. Far from being just a bright pop tune, the song stands as a culmination of George's growth as a songwriter, his desire for peace amid the chaos of the band and Apple, and his increasingly influential role in shaping the Beatles' later sound. Hey guys, if you love Here Comes the Sun, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Let's go. It's important to note that this wasn't the only song that George contributed to the album Abbey Road. He also wrote Something, a song Frank Sinatra hailed as the greatest love song of the past 50 years. So around this time, George was on a bit of a roll, especially given that he was far from the main songwriter in the band. Though George had made small contributions to the Beatles' early catalogue, like for example the 1963 track Don't Bother Me, his songwriting was often sidelined in favour of the Lennon-McCartney powerhouse. Still, George kept writing. It's by writing them, the same as writing books or writing articles or paintings. The more you do it, the better, or the more you can understand how to do it. I used to just write songs. I still do. I just write a song and it comes out however it wants to. And some of them are catchy songs, like Here Comes the Sun, and some of them aren't. But to me, there are just songs and I just write them, and some of them will be considered as good by maybe the masses and some won't. But to me, they're just songs, things that are there that have to be got out. So George's contributions to the Beatles' albums are all over the place. Songs like You Know What to Do and Not Guilty may not be too memorable, but he'd even had All Things Must Pass rejected by the band, and that's one of my favourite songs of all time. By 1969, George's songs were now impossible to ignore. Here Comes the Sun, the final song that he offered to the band, proved that. The song was born out of frustration. In his memoir, I Me Mine, George recalled skipping a business meeting at Apple Corps to escape the tension and the atmosphere brought on by legal troubles within the band. So instead, he drove to Eric Clapton's house in Surrey, found peace in his garden and picked up one of Eric's acoustic guitars. With the warmth of a spring after a long, cold English winter, the song just flowed out of him. Here Comes the Sun was written at a time when Apple was getting like school, where we had to go and be businessmen. Sign this and sign that. Anyway, it seems as if winter in England goes on forever. By the time the spring comes, you really deserve it. So one day, I decided I was going to sag off Apple. I went over to Eric Clapton's house. The relief of not having to go and see all those dopey accountants was wonderful. I walked around the garden with one of Eric's acoustic guitars and wrote Here Comes the Sun. Before we dive too much into the song, I think it's worth noting how similar it sounds to another song that he wrote, If I Needed Someone. Just give that a listen. George even admitted it sounded a little bit like the bells of Rimley by the Byrds. So, in history, the Beatles have recently just hired Alan Klein, more on him in another video, to sort out their business affairs, which was a move that greatly disrupted the harmony of the band. Well, a kind of as much harmony as there was in the band during the late 60s. George Harrison stated at the time, "Personally, I hope to get to the point where I can completely retire from the business side of things. Business is one thing, writing and creating, which we all want to do, is another thing entirely." In Eric Clapton's biography, he recalls these events. It was a beautiful spring morning and we were sitting at the top of a big field at the bottom of the garden. We had our guitars and were just strumming away when he started singing It's Been a Long, Cold, Lonely Winter, and bit by bit, he fleshed it out until it was time for lunch.
It was one of those beautiful spring mornings. I think it was April. We were just walking around the garden with our guitars, and that was the thing. I don't do that, you know. I'd only ever do. This was what George brought to the situation. He was just a magical guy, and he would show up with his guitar, get out of the car with the guitar, and come in and you'd start playing. And we walked around the garden. We sat down at the bottom of the garden, looking out over and the sun was shining, and it was a beautiful morning. And he started to sing. Here Comes the Sun, and the opening lines, you know, and I just watched this thing come to life.
George's approach was simple. I just write songs and they come out however they want to. But Here Comes the Sun was anything but ordinary. It clearly drew inspiration from Buddy Holly, The Byrds, like I mentioned earlier, and even his Indian music studies. George managed to create something that was both classic and fresh. It reminded me of Buddy Holly in a way, John Lennon stated at the time. This song is just the way he's progressing, you know? He's writing all kinds of songs. Once the door opens, the floodgates open. Paul even said to John during a break, I think that until now, until this year, our songs have been better than George's. Now this year, his songs are at least as good as ours. Every one of the Beatles was a huge Buddy Holly fan, so it's not unnatural that his works would seep their way into their own compositions, even despite the fact that each Beatle was trying to do something new and fresh. John Lennon, though, may have been an inspiration for the song, if only unrealised. When John was developing the song Sun King during the January 1969 sessions that evolved into the Let It Be film and album, he would sing the words "Here Comes the Sun" while playing it on guitar.
That's right, no slower.
We'll never know this for sure, but George may have had this in the back of his mind in Eric Clapton's garden on that day in April. It's funny to note too that in April 1969, it set the record for most sunlight hours for all of the 1960s, and that February and March were unusually cold. So he truly felt inspired by the nice weather, and the weather in the country at the time seemed to reflect how George was feeling about being a Beatle. Recording of the song began on July 7th, 1969, Ringo's 29th birthday at EMI Studio 2. It took 6 sessions to complete with. With John absent due to a car accident he'd had in Scotland, George, Paul and Ringo worked together to bring the song to life. George took charge, guiding his bandmates through the song's complex timing. Ringo, who's unfamiliar with the 7/2 time, had to physically feel the rhythm to make it work. But 13 takes later, they had a foundation.
He said, I've got this song, it's like 7/2 time. Yeah, so, he might as well have talked to me in Arabic, you know what I mean?
From there, George layered the track with acoustic guitars, lead vocal, and harmonised backing vocals with Paul. George took special care with each element, adding hand claps, experimenting with the Moog synthesizer, and carefully instructing the orchestra that joined the track in mid-August. At one point, he even recorded 2 guitar solos for the bridge, only to decide they didn't fit and asked the engineers not to use them.
And here was a guitar solo that he played, which was never made the final cut.
Perhaps the most telling was George's Moog synthesizer overdub. Still a new and largely mysterious instrument, the Moog added a delicate ribbon-controlled slide and a series of cascading tones to the song's middle section. George would fall in love with the instrument, producing a song for Jackie Lomax. And George's use of the Moog wasn't just him trying to be experimental and different, it was intentional, emotional, and very forward-looking. George insisted it be on the track and instructed Mal Evans to deliver it from his home and into the studio. Structurally, Here Comes the Sun is deceptively complex. It's a mix of 4/4 and odd time signatures, creating a flowing but unpredictable rhythm. Even the song's conclusion avoids standard resolution, with a delicate guitar riff echoing the bridge. The lyrics for Here Comes the Sun are, in my opinion, one of the reasons it stood the test of time. Every one of us, at some point in our lives, will feel like the dark, bad times are never going to end. But gently and gracefully in the song, George reminds us that the ice will melt and that the sun will come out, and it will be okay. It's one of the most universal Beatles songs because of the lyrics. This song isn't about helter-skelters or monkeys or glass onions. The lyrics are just so relatable for anyone. George had a way of writing songs that seemed so simple, yet were still deeply complex to write. I think that's just sheer talent. Abbey Road was released on October the 1st, 1969. Here Comes the Sun opens side 2. It's a brilliant contrast between the brilliance and craziness of I Want You She So Heavy, which ended side 1. It quickly became one of the most beloved Beatles songs, despite never being released as a single at the time, and its legacy has only grown. It appeared on major compilations like the Blue Album too. In the mid-1970s, each Beatle had released a best-of their solo work. Only George was the one to include a Beatles song. Wanna take a guess which one he used? Eventually, it was released as a single in the 1990s. George himself returned to the song many times during his solo career, performing it with Pete Ham at the concert for the Bangladesh, with Paul Simon on Saturday Night Live, and during his Japanese tour in 1991. In one deeply personal performance, he rewrote the lyrics to honour his friend, racer Emerson Fittipaldi. And I just think it's clear that the track meant a huge amount to George. It was kind of his defining moment. despite having penned other Beatles classics. But it's the time when people truly took him seriously. He created something really special with Here Comes the Sun. For me, I think it's a perfect example of how songs don't have to be overthought. While it's clear to create a track in the studio it wasn't an easy ride, the melody and the lyrics are so simple, so timeless, locking the song into a state of time freeze, unable to grow old or sound outdated. Here Comes the Sun stands as the moment for George Harrison. It proved he wasn't just a supporting player in the Beatles story, he was a creative force in his own right. With its optimism, grace, and craftsmanship, the song captures a rare moment of light breaking through the clouds. The Beatles were suffering as a band. Although Abbey Road was hailed as the Beatles returning to form, it's clear to someone like George that the days were still numbered. And how better to express that feeling by writing a song to reflect all of this. And more than 50 years later, it's still shining. Here Comes the Sun is the Beatles song. It's the top of Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you use. It's at the top of all the playlists. George bested Paul and John in the final furlong. Carl Sagan wanted it to be sent into space on Voyager 1, but sadly he couldn't get the rights in time. Well, how about that? Thanks very much for watching, guys. As always, before I go, I just want to mention something. If you're into rock and roll, you might want to check out Cult Hero. They've got some really cool t-shirts inspired by iconic gigs and legendary bands. If you do take a look, you can use the code R&R Archives for 15% off. This isn't a sponsor, this is my brother's business, and it would be great if you could check them all out. You'll see me in the Shea Stadium t-shirt in one of the next videos. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe, it really helps me out. And if you like what I do, please check out my video on some Beatles views that you may not know about. I'll see you in the next one.